Hello, this is Rachel with the Shades of Orange. Today I want to talk about the horror books that I read in the month of July. It was a little bit of a weird slumpy month, so I didn't read as much as I normally do, but I still managed to fit in some really good horror books, so I want to tell you all about them. Let's get started. First, I read a book called Nightface by Lydia Peever, which I received from the author and I talked about in a recent book haul. This book follows a young man named Gunnar who goes to high school when a mysterious ageless man shows up named Solomon. Something happens and then Gunnar wakes up years later without his memory, and the story is about him trying to piece together what happened. I love stories that involve someone without their memory. I love amnesia storylines, so this one worked really well for me. If you can't tell from the synopsis, which you probably can't, this is actually a vampire story, and at the beginning, because it's set in high school for the first chapter, I was like, oh, this almost reads like a Vampire Diaries episode, but trust me, definitely not. It's very dark and it speeds ahead to adult life very quickly. In fact, I do have to give warnings for triggers. There is rape in this book. It is dark, it is gruesome. If you like your vampires without that urban fantasy mystique, this is definitely one to pick up. I thought it was great and definitely recommend it. Next, I read a book called Corbin by Devin Lee. If that name doesn't sound familiar, you might know him better as the indie insomniac from YouTube. I'm a bit of an online friend with Devin, so I was very excited to check out his newest book, which he sent me a free copy, and this book definitely didn't disappoint. It's about a group of teenagers that when they fall asleep, they are attacked by monsters in their dreams. If that sounds a lot like the Nightmare on Elm Street movie, you're absolutely right. It definitely is, and I really enjoyed it. It's just a lot of fun. It's very entertaining. I wouldn't necessarily call it scary for someone who reads a lot of horror. It was very room temperature, as I like to say, and you don't necessarily need to have watched the movie in order to enjoy the book. I definitely think fans of the movie will get the most out of it, but it's completely accessible, it's very fun, it's entertaining, and I do recommend picking up Devin's book. I thought it was a lot of fun. Next, I read a book called Dead Haven by Flint Maxwell. I actually listened to this on audio, which was really well narrated. This follows a horror author who goes back to his small hometown, and quickly some kind of infection spreads and everyone in his town becomes zombies. This book is just exactly what it sounds, a really fun zombie story, but what I like so much is that it's very self-aware. The author in the story is actually someone who's written his own zombie novel, and it didn't exactly do very well, and so a lot of this book is talking about the author discussing the tropes of the genre and just kind of making fun of zombie films and just being very aware of all the tropes. So I think if you enjoy zombie stories, if you've read or watched a lot of them like I have, this is just a really entertaining way to consume another story, and it just makes lots of winks and nods and outright points fun at a lot of the things that kind of make zombie movies really dumb, but at the same time I just found it really entertaining. It's a start of a series, so I might continue. It wasn't scary at all, but again, I have a really soft spot for zombie fiction, so this one fit the bill and was just entertaining to read at the time. Next, I read a novella called Shine Your Light on Me by Lee Thompson, and I requested an e-copy from Apex Books. This is about a boy who is in a bar when something happens and light comes out of his body and he ends up healing everyone in the bar. And this is really what happens after that event. I'll be honest, I thought the synopsis sounded really unique and interesting, which is why I requested it, but the story itself didn't quite live up to those expectations. It's more of a character story that just is told from different perspectives, and you get little snippets of people's lives, but I felt like the narrative wasn't very cohesive, and it really didn't stay that closely to the synopsis that I just described. So unfortunately, it didn't work for me. I didn't love it. So that one is one I can't personally recommend, but it's an interesting premise for sure. Now I want to talk about graphic novels, and I read Ice Cream Man Volume 1 by W. Maxwell Prince, and this is a really weird anthology where all the stories center around a creepy ice cream man, and he definitely was creepy. Personally, I liked the first story in the collection the most. I thought it was creepy and weird and just worked really well for me. The other stories just didn't quite connect with me as much. And that can be the problem with an anthology or collection, that the stories themselves weren't interconnected. So just because I liked the first one didn't necessarily mean that I liked the other ones, but it was still weird and kooky. I gave it 3 stars. And if you also think that ice cream men are a little bit weird and creepy, this one might be one you want to check out. Then I read Jughead The Hunger, Volume 1 by Frank Tieri, and this is a really fun horror version of the classic Archie comics. I love the Archie comics. I grew up reading them. I still love them. And I've really been enjoying these horror graphic novels that they've been coming out with lately. This particular one is about a killer that is on the loose in Riverdale, and the gang is, of course, worried that people are getting murdered at night. And then, of course, the story is told from Jughead's perspective, who is always known for having an insatiable hunger. Well, it turns out that he might actually be a werewolf. It's not a spoiler, you know it right from the beginning. And the story goes from there. I just thought it was fun. It was dark, and surprisingly, these books aren't as campy as they could be. They're very well done, and I actually thought it was one of the creepier books I've read this month. Again, I'm just a huge fan of these horror Archie crossovers. There's a few different ones I've read already, and this one was great. It's really hard to do a good werewolf story, and I thought this one worked really well. So I do recommend that one if you're a fan of Archie and enjoy something a little bit darker. It's definitely one to check out. So that's it for this video. Again, please don't sweat the fact that I didn't have tons of recommendations. Sometimes your reading ebbs and flows, and I just didn't end up craving a lot of horror this month, but I'm sure next month I'll be back with even more recommendations. In the meantime, I'd love to hear about some of your favorite horror books that you read this month. If you were reading anything dark and twisty, I'd love to know. Thank you so much for watching. Talk to you again soon. Okay, bye-bye.